Welcome everybody to the seasonal diet, eating what our ancestors ate when they ate it, like we were evolved to do. We are at the time in the year now, it's a little late actually for some places in the world, but many fruits have started to be preserved now for the winter. For ancient humans, without the modern preservation techniques that we had today, they would have needed to figure out some way to feed themselves through the winter when nothing else was growing. And things start to go rotten, actually, if you just leave them out in the pantry. Fruits especially have a very short shelf life, and they really only grow in the late spring to summer time in the cooler regions of the world. So what would our ancestors have done to preserve these things so they would have some access to the fruits and some additional calories to eat during the winter? Number one, drying. This is by far the oldest fruit preservation method. Sun drying is the most ancient thing you can do. You don't even have to do anything for that. Just keep the fruit out in the sun and away from the rain. It's easier to do in places like the Middle East, for example, which is why they have a lot more dried fruits in their native cuisines, but it was possible too in the colder regions in the north of the world as well. Number two preservation method, smoking things. This is exactly what they would have done in the colder or wetter places. You can smoke meats. This is done more often actually, but you can also use this process to dry fruits and speed up that drying process so they can be preserved. Number three, heat and the oven will also work. The problem is that most humans did not have ovens in ancient times. The oven is a very ancient method of cooking in places like the Middle East or Asia, and they had some little makeshift ovens like that, clay ovens. But in Europe, most people did not have an oven in their house. Even if we go back 100 years ago, they more often used the fireplace if they had to warm something up quickly like that. So if people wanted to bake something even, they would be taking the dough or the bread or the meat or the cake or the fruit or whatever, they'd put it all on a tray and they'd carry it into the town center and they'd have the baker cook it in his big oven. A baker was basically like the oven of the whole village. This was actually a common practice up until recently in history, about 150 years ago, but if you have an oven today, most of us do. If you have an air fryer, even better, but that is one additional way that our ancestors would have used to dry fruit. It would just be not as common as the other method. Number four, sugar can be used to preserve fruit. You put the fruit in there, you heat it up, boil it, you mix it with some sugar, put it in a jar, and there you go. You have jam or preserves. It's a very, very old method and very simple, but this can keep your fruits preserved and edible for many, many months and even years if you do it right. This is a very, very old method of fruit preservation, but remember in the video I did earlier in the week, we didn't have the powdered cane sugar in Europe come in large amounts until about the 1300s. So before that, we would have had to use something else, some other sweet substance to preserve the fruit. And that brings us to number five, honey. This is also maybe the most ancient one. So if you put fruit in some honey and you seal it up in a jar, that fruit is going to last much longer, and honey never expires, okay? So humans and even the most ancient of times could have figured this out. It would have been very easy, but it would have also been very expensive and high resources, because honey is in a lot lower supply than the amount of fruit that you can pick from a tree and that you want to preserve. But the option is there. Our ancestors would have done it, but that's way too sweet for me, though. I do not like that option. Number six way to preserve fruits is vinegar. Same way that you use to pickle vegetables, preserve vegetables. It is also a preservation method that has been done for thousands of years with fruits. It just doesn't taste that nice, so we don't find a lot of these recipes, but there definitely are some fruits that have a long history of being pickled with vinegar for a very long time, like peaches, apples, pears, plums, currant, tomatoes, and olives actually, which are fruit, and those actually aren't bad at all if you preserve them in vinegar. But those are the kinds of things that humans have used vinegar to preserve fruits in. So that's about it. What else? Do you guys know of any other ways, any other methods of fruit preservation from around the world? Do you guys do any preservation yourself? I'll probably do it in the next couple weeks. I like to do that at this time of year, preserve a lot of these fruits, because remember, if you remember my video last year, I don't eat any fresh fruit from about January time until April or May. So I will maybe show you guys how I preserve some fruits and eat them dry throughout the